Good morning. This is the 5th episode of FAFO and Chill, in which the Chainstack Developer Experience team talks about the various things that we've been building and exploring in the Web3 space over the past few weeks. In classic Web3 fashion, we spend a lot of time exploring Web3 and building various tools. FAFO and Chill is a time in which we talk about these things and dive into the world of Web3 tech. Today, we have a few key topics. It's going to be pretty loose, nothing too set in stone. We're going to talk about AI privacy, as well as some of the tools that we've been using to combat specifically AI privacy in the context of using it for Web3 applications. We'll talk about an SDK that we recently built for the covalent unified API, which I'm personally a big fan of just in terms of utility. We built out a really cool SDK for it. We'll talk about that too. As well as just a couple of cool topics. As usual, I think just even over the past 2 weeks, Ake is back with us, so especially over the past week or two, we've been kind of heads down, just building a bunch of small tools here and there, fun stuff on the side. So we'll kind of touch on all these things, and it'll be a pretty good discussion. But quickly, before we do that, the main speakers that we have today, my name is Ethan. I go by the alias Tabasco. I am the developer relations lead here at Chainstack. With me, I have Ake, our director of developer experience, and David, our developer advocates lead. So what's up, guys? How you guys doing?
Hello.
But yeah, you're out in Vietnam. You want to quickly, before we kind of jump into some of the AI stuff, you're out in Vietnam at a few events. You did some panels, stuff like that. I think it was pretty exciting, at least from the pictures that I saw. It looked pretty good. So you want to throw us a quick recap of everything that happened over there?
Yeah, thanks, guys. So I recently went to the event that's called GM Vietnam. Apparently, this was the first one that they had. Organized by Kairos Ventures and Coin98, which is a huge company apparently in Vietnam. I didn't know they were as big as they are. They have offices in Hanoi, in Ho Chi Minh, in like multi-level offices. A lot of people in there. So the event itself was in Ho Chi Minh City. And it was very, very tightly organized. It was very, very good. They invited us, me from Chainstack as a kind of honorary speaker. So I did a couple of panels in there on the Web3 infrastructure and how to keep the cash flow coming in during this bear market, and also had a different one on MEV Solana at the Saigon Builder Space. Organized by Coin98. In general, it was very, very good. One of the key takeaways I have is that we were under the impression, me personally, for a long time, I was under the impression that Vietnam is big on gaming projects. Maybe because, for a long time they used to have all this mobile game development in there located in Vietnam. And then, again, I was under the impression that the games like Axie Infinity coming from Vietnam, this was kind of the shift from mobile into Web3, and because the guys knew how to do the gaming part, so they went with the Web3 gaming. During this trip, I don't think I made a single project that does gaming, so I think we were that was probably wrong stereotype on my part, thinking all the gaming. So there was quite a bit of development going on in there, in some kind of bigger things like Coin98, basically taking over Tomo Chain, because they backed Tomo Chain in the last round. They invested in it, and it's what I think is going to be similar to Binance and BSC. Going to be the EVM-based Tomo chain that used to be big in Vietnam. Is going to be used by and promoted by Coin98. And then there were quite a bit of people from Singapore, from Korea as well. Some of the cool guys I met is Luniverse. Shout out to Luniverse from Korea. These are the guys building some that's very similar to Morales. But with a lot of more features and a lot more kind of security and security-focused features. Because one of the things they're going to do is their focus is, and that's how the Luniverse thing started, which is they are onboarding enterprise customers into kind of easy Web3 development. And then yeah, quite a bit going on. Of course, people do AI. There are like in Singapore as well, in Vietnam as well, quite a few projects that they can put out the front end where you can chat ChatGPT style and just ask the bot, what's called the bot, what, like in your natural language, what's the token price, what's this, what's that, all this other stuff. Quite a few of them, but then there are some more developed ones, like Kyber launched the Kyber AI project, which they put a lot of effort in, and they involved some experts, AI and finance and all this stuff, and they're running an alpha version for this. They can do token, everything around token finances and tokenomics and all this stuff, AI based. So AI is big as well. So yeah, that's about it. I mean, there is a lot of, but I'm not just going to dive into all of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone to a few events here and there, usually when it's like local stuff and it's kind of accessible to go to. And almost always, especially like this year with Denver, I always go to an event with like the, intention to get a read on the industry, right? Because, when you go to an event, when you're online, it's easy to like not, like there's so much stuff happening always. It's like you have all Twitter and now you have Threads and, a million other platforms where everybody's always talking and building and stuff like that. But when you go to an event, I feel like it's a unique perspective on like, the industry as a whole and like where developers are at, where, what's being built, what's being focused on. And they talk about like AI and stuff like that. Of course, AI is kind of like the wave right now. And, that's also what we've been focusing a lot on too, because it's a really cool use case. And we'll talk more about additional AI tools and stuff like that we're building in a second. But I guess my main question to you would be, from your time at the event, what was your takeaway from like the space as a whole, at least in Vietnam? Is it better than you expected? Like, were there more people? Were people like super passionate about building? What was the general kind of read of the room over there?
Yeah. So Vietnam is unique, I think, in this regard. There's a lot of countries are, but Vietnam specifically, there is one they have, and I'm sure you guys know, being with Chainstack, I would think you probably get messages on LinkedIn from Vietnam software studios, software shops. This is usually the message you get. Hey, you're like with a development company, do you want to outsource your stuff to Vietnam? We can do anything. We can do anything for you. So I think the competition, for those software shops, software studios located in Vietnam is quite a bit, pretty tough. But the interesting point about them, I talked to a few of them during my time in Ho Chi Minh City at GM Vietnam. Their strategy is to be taking in the blockchain development Web3 projects from customers, as in, when customers ask them to develop stuff for them, and use this money and also to use this experience to, in the background, kind of start a Web3 project. Web3 product. So, if you think about it, there is quite a lot of teams, software teams, that are balancing this right now, and in hopes to succeed to become full Web3 products. So that's I think this is a really interesting development, especially in this bear market. Yeah, this one is probably the most interesting to me, to see what's going to come out of this. And I would think, I don't know too much into, like stuff like Axie Infinity, but I would think that previously successful Web3 companies in Vietnam, they went through similar path. It wasn't like the guys, people like teams in other parts of the world that start from scratch, raise a bunch of money, quite a bit of money, and then they have an idea, raise the money, and just run with this and implement this. These guys are really kind of tough. They are tough and I think so. Their development is lean, lean, very, very lean, and I think quite a bit can come out of this. At the same time, there is not enough talent. That's what people told me. There is still not enough talent in Vietnam. Vietnam as a country, they invest quite a bit again into software, kind of IT, information technology education in the universities. And they're just trying to pump as many as possible of software developers out there to kind of supply the demand that isn't there. So yeah, I mean, I think quite we are going to see a lot of Vietnam in Web3, and this is what the people in there are specifically trying to do, because they see a lot of potential in there still. And again, also Solana specifically was mentioned. So there is a team called Super Team that started in Vietnam, and they expanded into other countries like Turkey and some other ones, where they are trying to, where what they do is they specifically create a community of Solana developers, and they're kind of they have like software education, students and new graduates and people who want to transition to Web 2 to Web 3. There is like a full team working to get those guys into Solana, to supply the demand for Solana developers with people from Vietnam, which is also an interesting take. So yeah, that's my take.
That's pretty interesting. Super Team. Those guys are awesome. I've talked to some of their...
you know the Super Team. Okay.
Yeah, they're huge. And I spend, when it comes to different Web3 ecosystems, I'd probably say the number one ecosystem that I spend the most time in is Solana. Just because the amount of cool things that are being built over there. Of course, Avalanche, Ethereum, Polygon, all these other ecosystems are incredible. They're building some really cool things. But Solana, to me personally, stands out as just being like a super interesting ecosystem, especially on the blockchain side of things. And they have Super Team. This is one of their big things, right? They have Super Team Vietnam. I'm in their Discord. They are super nice group of people. Super Team Germany, Super Team India, Super Team UK. I mean, they have a group for a ton of different major countries, and they do a fantastic job of number one, onboarding developers into the Solana space, which maybe there's something similar for a few EVM chains. I guess maybe Build Space is doing something a little bit like that. But in general, Super Team does a great job of getting people into Solana, getting people building on Solana. And you can see the result of that in the ecosystem, right? You can go into the Solana and see there's a ton of independent developers and a ton of small teams, almost in a higher density than other blockchains. So it's pretty cool. I'm glad that you...
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about this and go on a tangent as well in there as well. Sure. But Solana, for a project built from scratch, it's, in non-EVM, it's just so different. It's really tough to get people in. And I think Alex Yakovenko at some point last year said, we eat glass at Solana, right? We are so hardcore. We don't care about this, bull market, bear market. We're hardcore builders. And this seems to be, a good approach. They are doing all the things right? Not just trying to kind of hype, hey, how do you grow the developer ecosystem? How do you kind of, do events, do this or that? They are very, very kind of specific in executing. They execute and they know how to execute, right? The Super Team, it was really interesting experience to me. This was really interesting. Right. One other, thing on this, but not really the same thing, but I just want to mention this since we're talking Solana. So the Solana of the previous bull run, well, pre-previous, I guess, at this point, was EOS, and I was talking. So at the GM Vietnam event, I met the person who is the founder of Crypto Jobs List, which is, our friend is also in Singapore, a project in Singapore, which recently had an interview with Ethan, and before that they had an interview with me, so we go a long way with Crypto Jobs List. And I was talking to the founder at GM Vietnam. We just met there. And we were talking Solana, and I was like, well, yeah, the previous bull run of Solana was EOS, and I'm not sure, if he did all the things correctly. And I'm asking him, and I'm telling him today, today nobody remembers EOS, but it used to be basically Solana of that time. And he tells me, yeah, of course I know EOS. We won the hackathon on EOS. And I was like, where was this hackathon? It was the first one, the very first one in Hong Kong in 2018, I believe. And I was at the same hackathon. So Web3 is very, very small world. And I remember our team won nothing, and these guys, they got the #1 prize. And I don't even remember him in there, but yeah, that, and he doesn't remember me, of course, because we didn't even win. But it's a really small world. It's just super funny. Anyway, I just really wanted to mention this, and shout out to Crypto Jobs List. They are an awesome company.
That's dope. Yeah, I love all those guys. They posted another clip today, and the interview that we did was great. They asked some really great questions. We got some great points, and they're even still distributing it. And that was done like almost a month ago now. So there's a really awesome group of people over there. They're super dedicated to supporting the Web3 ecosystem. But like EOS, so I originally got in the space in maybe 2020-ish. I think maybe just about after the time of that blockchain. I've heard of it before, and it's a name that pops up in my head that I recognize. But what were the key, like what were the value propositions of EOS? Was it the same thing as Solana? Was it like fast finality, stuff like that, or?
Yeah, it was not. Yeah, technology maybe not as sophisticated. It was good enough for that time. And I was in a company we were building on EOS as well. It was BFT 21 validators, and I'm still going to mention this, because similar thing happened to Solana, as in us building on EOS and everybody just doing stuff on EOS. We got an insane, well, I can call it insane. I think it is insane amount of hate from hardcore Ethereum guys. Which is super, super funny, because similar thing, I remember similar thing happening to Solana, but also, which is, to me, which is kind of funny and, but I guess it's ironic, but maybe it's not ironic, maybe it's live. Because Ethereum guys, and I was there too, used to get, still get, but used to get a lot more of hate from Bitcoin guys, right? It's just, every new generation we get this, and then the Ethereum guys were kind of, wow, the kind of the forward-thinking ones, innovating and all this stuff, and Bitcoin was kind of the old guard. But then Ethereum guys turned into, on the surface, same people who hate on all the other projects, including EOS. EOS specifically got a lot of hate. But yeah, but then, EOS died, so maybe, and the company I worked for died with that as well. So maybe they were correct. But yeah, EOS used to be this super hype. I think their ICO was $4 billion.
Wow.
Their hackathons in general. I'm not sure. I don't think Solana. I think Solana is lean, a lot leaner. But EOS was the opposite of lean. It was just a lot of spending, left and right. Hackathon, you go to hackathon and you get a lot of merch, which is not even near what guys offer today. It was like all high quality. Like they'll give you headphones, which is Bose BOSE, styled as EOS, and you just get a lot of very, very expensive stuff. So yeah, well, too bad EOS died, but
right.
But I think I kind of I like Solana's approach a lot more, even though I think, like last year before that, Solana could have afforded same amount of spending that, EOS used to have. So.
Right. Yeah, Solana is pretty lean generally. Like, the cool thing with Solana is, of course, they're separated into the Solana Labs and the Solana Foundation. But most of like the large things that happen in that community are almost completely like created and funded by the community. Right? So their community is incredibly passionate. There's a lot of protocol communities that are very passionate. Like Avalanche is very passionate as well. But like Solana, the developers in there and the users in there, they're really passionate. And the projects, because it's non-EVM, which creates loyalty for projects that are building. Because if you're building for Solana, then you're building for Solana. It's not like Avalanche or Polygon or whatever, where it's like, oh, I'm going to build in Polygon, but I'm also going to add in Optimism or whatever, Arbitrum. Because those, it's very easy to do that. It's like a handful of code. But with Solana, you have to very intentionally build for that ecosystem, which as a result, it creates a lot of incredibly loyal projects. And that kind of spirals. It's like a snowball effect almost, to the point where we have these massive hackathons that are created almost exclusively by the community. It's sponsored by projects in the community. They create even more projects that are also now loyal to Solana. So it creates like this almost isolated ecosystem of just like continued growth, right? More projects come up, they are successful, they bring more people into Solana, they fund the next hackathon, which brings more projects, and it continues. And I think it's for good reason, because, we talked about this briefly actually on episode 1. When I think about solutions that require consumer-friendly use cases, right? So things that are like fast finality and low fees, and like, you don't have to think about transaction processing and it just works. Then like, as somebody who works with stuff like that, I immediately go to Solana. I'm like, well, Solana would be my first choice, because it's just so easy to like throw an application on there and not have to worry about, oh, is my transaction going to go through? Is it going to take 5 minutes for somebody to whatever. Go for it.
It's very good, but something else I want to mention on this point, which is, my thinking exactly. I'm not sure if I mentioned during this episode or recently. I was just talking to so much recently. Different events. But I was talking to Eugene, who's our founder and CTO, at one point, and we were just, discussing Solana and Ethereum. And it was very obvious when we were comparing to operating system that Ethereum is Linux and Solana is macOS, obviously. Everything is kind of, Ethereum is kind of hardcore, like kernel stuff. You need to patch it, you need to put things together. You need to figure it out on your own, do a deep dive in EVM and all this stuff. Solana has a lot of, all those nice things exposed to you, available to you to build on it. And it just looks nice. Even the docs, even if you go to the docs, and kind of user, targeted to the user, a bit, black boxy on the inside. I feel not in the way that, it kind of abstracts the view in there, but in the way that, just a lot of it is exposed for you to operate, that you don't even need to kind of deep dive into a lot of things in there, which is what you can do if you want to go that way. But yeah, that's how I feel. But I love both, like Linux and macOS. And I was thinking, what would be the Windows? What would be the Windows of the protocols? But I have a few ideas, but I'll probably not gonna mention this, because this might not be best comparison.
Right.
But the Ethereum, like EVM in general, is Linux, and Solana is macOS. That's kind of the view that I have.
Yeah, I think like the idea has always been, maybe there's going to be like, in 5 years there's going to be 4 blockchains or 3 blockchains that like are the, they're what's used. Like you have like your Windows and your Linux and your Mac, and there's like not. So right now there's a million blockchains: Optimism, Arbitrum, Avalanche, Polygon, Solana, Ethereum. I mean, the list goes on and on of small chains and large chains. And people, use them. Some people don't. And I think, who knows? I don't know what'll happen. But David, I'm curious to get what your take is on this. David, what's your, if you had to, I won't put you on the spot, but if you had to, choose 1 or 2 blockchains that you prefer using on a day-to-day basis over anything else, is there like one that stands out to you specifically as being something that you enjoy using?
Yeah, usually when I try to go do stuff, I actually try Avalanche. It's usually reliable, it's fast, it's easy to get tokens, testnet tokens. Usually that's what I try to do, I guess. All the Ethereum ones are always clogged and super slow and everything.
Yeah, just one quick thing. I was talking to Megan, the developer relations person from Avalanche. She used to be with EY, but now she's at Avalanche, and she told me Korea, they are seeing a lot of usage from Korea in Avalanche, which is interesting. Sorry, because I would have expected Clayton to be there, but looks like Avalanche is getting traction in Korea, which is interesting. So yeah, similar to what you David say. People like Avalanche as well, which is cool.
Yeah, I would have thought the same thing, that Clayton would be kind of number one. Me and Nick actually were in a space with Clayton this morning, with their head of ecosystem. And I feel like that's kind of their primary market. You know, they had DeFi Kingdoms for a while. I don't know if they still do. But they've been doing pretty well. I think the thing with Avalanche, for whatever reason, it just feels, and kind of, Dave, like you pointed out, it just feels like well-rounded usually. Like the Tesla tokens are easily available. Transactions like are very reliably go through. They have a nice selection of applications. There's a lot of like liquidity and stuff like that. So that's a big reason like why I like using Avalanche a lot. But like, you know, when I was building my first application a few years ago, testing the application on mainnet Ethereum was like a big occasion. It was like, okay, I'm spending $5 on gas fees. I gotta get this right. There's no going back. I gotta make sure like everything works here. Because, you know, I think even to this day on my main wallet, I probably have 25 Ethereum transactions, maybe a little bit more. You know, maybe a little bit more across different wallets, but it's like sending one Ethereum transaction, especially if it's a token or something, it's expensive in fees, and it's just like not accessible to most people. Yeah. And of course, that's the whole point of things like Polygon and, you know, the layer 2 solutions. But I think in general, it's so much easier just to like use and explore chains in which like those two key things are nailed down. So fees, number one, I think are probably one of the most important parts. Like if it costs $5 to send a transaction, then it probably isn't going to be accessible to like 99% of people. And like the transaction speed, right? So the problem with Ethereum, and I love Ethereum, it's an incredible piece of technology, but it's like you pay $5 for transaction fees, or at least you did. This is back like at the peak of the bull run, but you pay $5 and then it's 20 minutes, and it's like, okay, when is my transaction going to go through? Like you're sitting there and you're waiting, watching it. And then, you know, I think for solutions where it's like, oh, you pay, you know, a thousandth of a cent and your transaction is done and, you know, faster than you sent it. I mean, these are the things that like are accessible to use, and I think will power, and I hope will power any user-facing application. Because once you have something that's like sufficiently fast enough, right, and it's cheap enough, then at that point you've effectively abstracted the blockchain, like the traditional blockchain part of Web3 out, right? Because like a big reason why people don't like using blockchains for things and kind of implementing it in applications is because a lot of times, especially for more traditional blockchains, especially like Bitcoin, stuff like that, it's a point of inefficiency, right? It was like, well, why would I pay for coffee in Bitcoin if it's going to take, you know, 30 minutes for the transaction to go through? I'm going to pay all these fees, and like I'm paying 0. You know, whatever, add a bunch of zeros, 1 Bitcoin for a coffee. I mean, these are things that people tend to stray away from because of the inefficiencies with it. So then once you introduce something that's like, oh, you know, I can pay for this and it's cheaper and it's faster than traditional payment methods, then, and you can apply that same logic to gaming and NFTs and whatever other vertical you want to talk about, and it just becomes so much easier to like convince people to use it. Because Nick and I this morning, we were in a space with some like VC launcher on Twitter, and the question was, why is it so difficult to get people into Web3, right? Why does nobody want to use it? And I was like, well, it's not exactly the most inviting space right now. And I think we talked about this briefly on one of the past episodes, but it was like, you know, you go into Web3, you create your wallet, and like, especially if you're on a larger use chain like Bitcoin or something like that, then, okay, now you're paying all these fees, and, you know, you're trying not to get scammed everywhere, and there's all this malicious stuff, and it's just crazy. And, you know, I think these are probably like the largest barriers to entry. But that's why, I mean, to wrap it around, that's why I'm excited for solutions like Solana. I think Solana and like the Solana Foundation, the builders in there, including, and I think this goes for similar chains on EVM, right? Things like Avalanche and stuff like that. Like they understand that the future of Web3 will be in things that are like generally abstracted away. So experiences that don't feel too blockchain-like, if that makes sense. but also reap the benefits of blockchain, so they get decentralization, etc. Anyways, just to
it's a good one. I want to talk about this a little bit more as well. It's a very good one because I was talking about this and I did a panel on something similar. I was talking about this in Vietnam, and since we just chatted anyway, it's a very, very good point that you bring up, Ethan. I think we mentioned this in one of the previous episodes a little bit as well on this, blockchain adoption and all this stuff. Is thinking about it and where we are today, because Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, I still think these are very good names, and they kind of reflect the things that were happening, even though everybody is just talking about them. But I'm just going to give some perspective. I think where we are in Web 3 today is kind of 2006, 2007 maybe, where the web in general was. That was where Web 2 was starting. And there were a few things happening in there, which is AWS. I think they started in 2006, and then GCP, so 2008, 7 or 8, and Azure somewhere in there, 2008, I guess, as well. Which is kind of one-way, just websites, kind of similar to billboards. They weren't real platforms. They were just people listen stuff in there and just communicating one way from the creator to the user. Then we had Web 2, where platformization, that was the actual term in there, that unlocked a lot of billions of dollars on the web, with things like Uber and Airbnb and Kickstarter, and BlaBlaCar. I think there was just a lot of platforms in there that were starting, that all of a sudden unlocked a lot of dollars, basically a lot of funds that were previously unavailable to people, for example, with Airbnb. But these applications, they were created, they were running on the infrastructure, right? On the infrastructure. If there was no cloud providers, at the time it would have been a lot more difficult for people to kind of bootstrap and start all those web applications and platforms in there. Because if you are still running like in the 90s or early 2000s on our own servers, where you can't load balance, where you need to put up a server in different countries, so that your end users can have uniform latency, uniform experience across different locations. And also, you need a full team to maintain all of this. It's just taking a huge toll on kind of your creativity so instead of doing like kind of creative Web 2 things that you need to focus on, you'd have to spend a lot of time on your infrastructure. And I think there's something that's happening right now as well, with companies like Chainstack taking care of all the boring stuff, and just making sure your infrastructure is resilient and reliable and has all the uptime, so you don't even need, you just get one endpoint, that's all you do. Maybe a few different ones, different services like indexing and the nodes itself. But even like recently with the stuff that we launched, you just get one endpoint for a protocol, which is a global endpoint, does all the stuff for you, like load balance and all this and all the things. And then and with Solana as well, you get this kind of infrastructure as the infrastructure matures. Is development teams and teams, they spend less time on any of this and more on the actual adoption. You can't really do this without the infrastructure being there yet. So this is kind of, it needs to go from grassroots. It needs to go, from the lower stack to the upper stack. It can't go from the starting with the end user and adoption and just go back to the infrastructure. It needs to be maybe in similar directions, but the bigger part needs to be going from the infrastructure. For example, you can user experience. It improved a lot in the past few years. It was just horrible. Even like 6 years ago, it was horrible. It's a lot better right now. But if you started tackling, kind of solving this issue from the other end, and a lot of people were trying to do this, they would invite designers design people from Web2 to Web3 and tell them, hey, design a very, very good user experience for us. Design something that people are used to. It should be Web2-like. But then when this person, like UX expert, UI designer, whatever, they start diving into it and they start doing the interface, turns out they can't really do it in the same way that, that Web2 operates, right? You can't really, hey, let's put a button in there. But then what is this button doing? You need to have a node, you need to confirm transaction, you need to do this or that. You don't have sponsored transactions, you have today, but like a year ago, maybe you didn't have those. It's just a lot of infrastructure isn't ready to do the good user experience. That's my point, right? So you need to have, and again, Solana is a very good example. You need to have most of this prepared to do the frictionless, kind of smooth user experience for for people who can create this experience. They need to, they can only rely on the existing infrastructure. So yeah, that was my point.
Yeah, I think that's a really strong point. And you reminded me of back when this was actually back in December, I think, back when we were out in Turkey. Is nearing the end of that event with the whole Chainstack team, I started writing a thread because I had it was like the week after I wanted to get my content ready for the week they got back. So I was writing a thread and it was about this exact topic. I eventually published it and had a bunch of infographics and stuff like that. But as I was writing it, I realized that exactly what you're saying in terms of when it comes to generating adoption, it's like it starts at the top, right? So the top level you have infrastructure. Right, or even beyond that, you have things like cloud computing, right? So like AWS and Chainstack Cloud, stuff like this, and below that you have now node providers, right? APIs, RPC nodes, subgraphs, right? The kind of foundational grassroots things that you need to build high quality user experiences. You need an RPC node. First and foremost, I even published a whole video today talking about this exact thing, but RPC nodes are totally foundational for every application. So you need something that works and doesn't just enable you to build an application, but empowers clean user experience. You need access to the data that your application uses. I mean, there's a million checklists here for this base level Web3 infrastructure, and then below that now you have developers, right? And so now at the point in which we have all of the infrastructure that we need. That's not only Chainstack, that's also things like blockchains themselves, so things like Solana. These are all things that I would personally classify as infrastructure, right? The platforms, the tools in which developers can utilize to create applications, right? So then below that, now you have developers, and now these developers need to, A, be motivated, and B, just start building things with that infrastructure that exists, right? So now if they're motivated enough and they start building things, now they build applications, right? And this is usually in tandem with product guys and people that understand the space and user experiences and stuff like that. And then not until all of these huge layers of cloud and Web3 infrastructure and blockchains and developers, not until all these are complete, right? And we're at a point in which they're healthy and that they're generating innovative applications, then that end user part will never come, right? We need everything up here first before we can get to this bottom part. So this is a key thing. I see all these people that talk about user adoption or mainstream adoption, and it's a totally over-exhausted topic at this point, but I think in general, people, for some reason or another, and this isn't everybody, but I see a lot of the time, people think of mainstream adoption looking like everybody, a billion people coming into space and saying GM every morning, and saying wag me, and putting NFT profile pictures. I mean, this won't happen, unfortunately. This is this whole Web3 culture is almost entirely exclusive to the small amount of people that are currently in the space. I highly doubt there's going to be a point in time in which everybody is waking up and saying GM on threads and Twitter, and that's our version of mainstream adoption. I don't see that happening. So I think instead, and that's the reason why it's like that so right now, and the reason why it feels like Web3 is this in-group of enthusiasts, right? These people that are just have developed their own culture and are using these crazy acronyms and whatever, and NFTs and $100,000 monkey profile pictures. These are things that are created out of a culture of a small group, right? But what you'll see, I think, especially as we progress, is that if we are successful in onboarding a lot of people, right? So if a lot of people come into space, if we have all the infrastructure ready, developers start building things and start onboarding people, I think this culture will start to dilute, right? Have more people in the space. There's going to be less room for the current like Web3 culture thing, which I love, by the way. I have nothing against Web3 culture. I'm just saying it's like not, it's not a sustainable idea to think that's going to last forever. But I think at that point it'll start to dilute, and eventually Web3, and I even wrote like a long response to a tweet about this over the weekend. But Web3 will integrate with existing systems, right? So we'll see Web3 enhance things. It'll be abstracted away in a lot of cases. It'll be used for digital identity, and you'll have some games that use Web3, and it won't be such as like a isolating thing, right? It won't be like, oh, there's a Web3 community. Like look at whatever they're doing over there. It's it's going to be like, this is just a technology that we leverage as part of like just the general modern infrastructure stack. But I don't know. Maybe that's far off. What do you guys?
Yeah, that's a good point. I want to kind of a bit random things on this, but I have something there as well. One is GM and all this stuff. When you talk to gamers who are not actual Web3 or who just joined Web3, they feel a bit cringy about those because Web3 kind of appropriated there. It was original GGGM. It was the gaming community, right? They were doing this, and I think this happened last bull run because before that we didn't. We had more like decentralization, blah blah blah. Now GM is part of Web3 culture, but even that is appropriated from the other culture. But the other point is now that it's part of it, you're very correct, Ethan. In when it goes mainstream, I'm kind of curious to see what's going to happen because it'll get diluted, it'll die off, it can be a normal thing. But I'm not sure how relevant this example is, but I think it is. If you guys know Joe Rogan, I think everybody does, right? Joe Rogan Experience. For a very long time, the Joe Rogan Experience, the podcast, was kind of on the fringes on the internet, right? And he was able to speak freely, to do whatever stuff in there. But when he got more famous, and I think he had like millions and millions of dollars, the Spotify deal or whatever. When he went mainstream, all of a sudden he was like in the spotlight, and he had to all of the stuff that he mentions. Now that he became mainstream with Elon Musk as well, and after he had all those big guests, people who are not a part of this fringe culture. They're like, oh my god, what is he doing? This person is a little bit crazy. And then Joe Rogan, because he has a Spotify deal, has to record videos and say, here's what I meant about COVID, here's what I really see. He kind of needs to explain it to people. It's just an interesting kind of thing that happened in there, where even though he had like a lot of followers, a lot of people who knew it was a little, you don't just go and like blindly trust Joe Rogan. You just listen to Joe Rogan for fun because he has some very good guests. But when he goes mainstream, people are used to consume information in a different way when it's mainstream, right? Now they think that Joe Rogan is like on Spotify. Everything he says, you need to kind of you need to challenge this. It's a different one. I'm not sure if you know what I mean, but I'm thinking we might have a similar transition with Web3. I'm curious to see what's going on in there. Like some of the things that we take for granted, like you can get rug pulled. It's just some of the things are in nature of like innate nature, like intrinsic nature of Web3. But when it goes mainstream, I don't know what's it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be similar to the Joe Rogan transition. People are going to feel very strongly about different things.
Yeah, I can definitely see that happening. I watch Joe Rogan every now and then. I actually didn't until he went mainstream. I didn't watch him too much before, but I see that all the time. Like and I definitely think something similar happened in the industry where as soon as the community of something becomes diluted, it's just like the inside jokes and the culture. It's like people don't get it, right? Or it's just like it's not sustainable on like a large population, so it just gets like ironed out basically, right? And now you have just like the normal, whatever, Web 2 culture that leverages Web 3, which I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that once it happens, it'll be indicative of like, okay, well, we did what we wanted to do, right? We got the mainstream adoption. Maybe we don't have GMs and FAFOs anymore, but we,
Right.
we have the mainstream adoption that we want. So I think this, we'll see what happens with that, but I think in general, I love the Web3 culture, but it'll be a good thing. If it's gone, then that means that, the reason why everybody's here, it was all for something. But really real quick, I think we're at 50 minutes here. David, I want to touch on a few AI things. So we opened up the space today talking about a kind of a few key topics. So, we talked about Vietnam and the events over there. And I think it was really cool to learn about the fact that there's still a ton of building happening over there, especially in spaces like Solana, and a lot of people leveraging Avalanche and cool applications being built. And I think that going into the future, hopefully, especially when you look at the entire market, not just Vietnam, this will continue to happen. But I think currently, of course, a big part of that development is AI. I think we're going to continue to see that in the future because AI, in a lot of ways, goes hand in hand with Web3. It makes Web3 a lot easier. Web3 is historically and traditionally a difficult to interact with ecosystem, right? It's hard to get Web3 data. Nobody knows how to use Etherscan unless you've been here for a long time and you've learned how to do it. I mean, these are things that interacting with Web3, reading the blockchain, whatever it may be. These are traditionally difficult things, and now all of a sudden, ChatGPT and like this interface comes out, and this is an interface in which through just asking it questions, it can do complicated tasks. So it's okay, well we have an ecosystem that is extremely complicated. And we have a bunch of people that don't know how to use it, and a bunch of people in this space that don't know how to use it, both, that's already here and that isn't here. It's okay, well, this technology is perfect then, right? We can leverage AI, large language models in specific, to achieve complicated Web3 tasks that previously would require 6 months of learning the entire space and, learning how to operate a wallet and block explorer and stuff like that. So I think that's probably a big reason of why we've seen it. And another big thing is that AI solutions, plugins and stuff like this, and we talk about this all the time, but when you're creating things, it's always you want a minimal amount of effort for the maximum result. So you want to find the balance point there. You don't want to put too low an effort into where it's a terrible product, but you also don't want to do more effort than the result is, because then you're wasting your time. So I think AI is a perfect case of doing something that doesn't take a whole ton of development. It's easy to implement. And the result is being able to create an interface with your application or with the blockchain or whatever you're building in Web3 that is 10 times user-friendly, 10 times more user-friendly than any existing solution, right? And now I doubt we're going to use ChatGPT as the main interface with the blockchain, but it's still cool to see all these things being developed because it truly does make the ecosystem more approachable, in my opinion. So to kind of wrap that around to what we've been doing, and we talked a lot about this in the last episode, but we've been building, of course, the Chainstack ChatGPT plugin. We've been very happy with how it's turned out and everything that's been happening with it. We think that it's a super strong plugin. If anybody listening to this hasn't heard of it yet, check out my Twitter or our YouTube channel. If you're watching it on YouTube, then you can just click on the channel button, and we have a video about the plugin, go through all the features, same videos on my Twitter. But it's a fantastic tool for leveraging Chainstack infrastructure, right? That infrastructure stack that we were talking about earlier. So APIs and subgraphs and RPC nodes and stuff like that. And leveraging infrastructure to interact with the blockchain through natural language and through the traditional ChatGPT interface. So that's what we've been building. It should be verified soon. We're very excited about that, and we think that it's only getting better every week pretty much as we improve it. Another thing though that, as we were building it and as we've been exploring AI, is that we've kind of found an issue, right? We're okay. So, and I am totally guilty of this. I'm definitely not a saint in this, but when you're interacting with AI, it's very easy just to say, oh, here's my private key and here's my API key and whatever, here's my RPC endpoint. Because you don't think about it, right? You just paste stuff in there and you talk to ChatGPT and it's just whatever, you're giving it all of your information and here's my name and here's my address and some points. I even see people accidentally paste their credit card information in ChatGPT, which is insane. So these are things that really should not be happening because you're throwing all this information, this private information, into a black box, right? You don't know where it's going. You don't know how it's being used. Is it being stored somewhere? OpenAI says it does. It doesn't store sensitive information, but you can never be sure. So it's security practices always say, do not throw your API keys and your RPC endpoints and most importantly, please do not throw your wallet private keys into ChatGPT, because then you're putting yourself at security risk. So as a response to this, as a response to the fact that like people often unknowingly or just, out of circumstance paste sensitive things in ChatGPT and throw their information into this black box, is that, and David, you can talk a little bit about it in a second. But we haven't created yet. We are working on creating. It's, we're in the process of FAFOing with it and like trying to figure out a way to create it. But essentially the idea here is that this is a Chrome extension that will allow you to utilize ChatGPT with peace of mind that you aren't sending ChatGPT anything sensitive. So maybe, David, I won't kind of hog the explainer here. So David, you want to take us through the extension and how it works and kind of how we're achieving this like privacy barrier between input and ChatGPT?
Yeah, so I actually spent a good day of, today has been a good day of faffing on this. It's 9 o'clock in the evening right now. I spent pretty much the whole day working on that. I'm feeling exhausted. My brain is melted. But this is actually something that goes back to what you were saying, that this type of tools really open doors to many things. I never worked on a Chrome extension. I have no idea how a Chrome extension works. And just because of ChatGPT, I was able to put it together almost. So that's actually, it's pretty incredible. But yeah, this actually came out from an article that I read of some other company that made something like this more dedicated to Web2 stuff. And I was like, wait a moment, they're onto something. I do this stuff all the time. and I don't even think about it, I paste stuff, sensitive information there all the time. And I'm thinking these guys had a pretty brilliant idea, and I looked on their website and they're like super duper closed source. You have no information about it. You cannot even see how it works unless you contact them and stuff like that. And that got me thinking, wait a second. We should probably, it would be interesting to have something like this, but it would be a little bit more accessible maybe. So I'm like, why don't we make an open source one? And why don't we make it also related to blockchain? So then instead of just covering, credit card information, API keys, it also covers, Ethereum addresses and private keys and stuff like that. So that's kind of how the whole idea started. And of course I text Ethan and say, hey, we should probably do something like this. Like, yeah, of course, let me faffle something together. So that's usually how these things start, like to text 5 minutes reader, like, okay, we have a project started. And this, I think, is really how it started. Like the main concept of this, obviously this is going to be fully open source. I think on something this sensitive is important to see how it works. I'm really taking the hard way, because if I could take the easy way of just spinning up an API, I would be already done with the product. We could already publish it. But I'm really struggling to try to make everything local, so that every information that is sent to this application is going to be local in the browser. Is not sent to another server. Even though we can open source the server and say, hey, this is how it works, it's still something that people probably shouldn't trust anyway. So we're really going that direction, and then it's going to be fully open source, and you can actually see, hey, this is what's happening in there.
Yeah, it's exciting. I think this is like, when it comes to Web3 security, and we talk about it all the time, but like Web3 security is such a weird balance, because it's like there's so many considerations. Like, don't click on bad links. Don't put your money into places that might get rugged. Don't do this. And now on top of like this huge list of things, now you have don't paste your keys and your information to ChatGPT. And it's like, okay, there's just a lot of things here to remember. So it's like the point of this is to basically allow you to not have to think about that, right? So you can just like, let's say you're taking a paste from your source code, right? And maybe it includes some environment variable, or you have an exposed key and like just the index file or whatever, and you throw it into ChatGPT, and typically that information is now you don't know what happened to it, right? You just basically give yourself a voluntary security breach, which is not good, especially in Web3 when it's like so important to be as secure as possible. So the point of this is to reduce that and say, okay, you can still paste your entire index file into ChatGPT if you want, but just use this extension so that when you do it, you're not giving ChatGPT all of your keys and access to all of your Chainstack platform and everything else that you're using. So, this is kind of our key consideration, and hopefully something to use in tandem with other plugins, because, I think we should actually hopefully have our ChatGPT plugin, which is something that we've already completed, which is crazy because that was a huge project. You should see, I can't post it, not like on the FAFO show or anything, but you should see our list of projects. Dave and I, we have like this page. The list of projects that we have is massive. It's like this SDK and this SDK and this ChatGPT thing and this AI thing and whatever and this and this. And just like every week it's like, oh, we should build this. And so add it to the list. We'll get to it at some point. And then like the same thing with I think I have at any given point in the day, maybe 25 notepads open, and each of them has tasks and ideas and projects that I'm just like, pushing through throughout the day. And it's just like with Web3 plus AI, there's so much opportunity to build things like this. And really, like, our focus as, and maybe you agree with this, maybe you don't, David, is like, as an infrastructure provider, number one, we want to provide people with a way to have an easier method of interaction with the blockchain that is most importantly facilitated through the infrastructure that we provide. So like that's the key part of the plugin, right? It's like, you're using Chainstack infrastructure, you're leveraging it without having to, create a script and kind of like learn development. You can still leverage Chainstack infrastructure, like this whole platform that we built out. But you can do that through the means of reading Web3 data with ChatGPT. And then additionally, we want people that not only use this, but also interact with Web3 in general, whether it's developers. And in this case, I think this plugin or this extension is primarily targeting developers, because I doubt most users are just going to paste their private key into ChatGPT that's not like in code somewhere or whatever. The idea with this is that developers that are using ChatGPT for Web3 development will now have a method with this extension. Whenever we complete it, we'll have a method to do it with kind of a sound mind. So you're not going to have to worry about, where's the information going when I send it to ChatGPT. So like, our focus for all of these projects, for, our 20 million projects that we have on this Notion page, it's all, with the intention of like creating things that reduce friction in Web3, right? Like maybe I can do like a circle around segue here. Like this is at the foundation of everything, right? We've talked about a lot of topics today. We've talked about protocols. Like this is like the first half of our conversation was about protocols, specifically with the lens of like what enables adoption, right? What are people going to use? What's important to people? What's important to developers? And, we talked about like the stack of development. You have like cloud, and then you have like Web3 infrastructure, which includes blockchains and Chainstack, stuff like that. And then you have developers, and then you have users all the way at the bottom. And, solutions like what we build on the side, and of course like our primary infrastructure stack, are built with the primary intention of enabling this, right? Enabling the infrastructure and empowering developers to build these applications. And I think, of course, we're only two people. Chainstack is only one organization, but I think as we progress throughout the space, hopefully we'll see more of these things, right? And everything will be refined, and that's kind of the idea with a lot of these projects. But yeah, I mean, I think we touched on a lot of things. David and Ake, were there any, I guess, final key topics you want to touch on here?
Not really. Keep building. Yeah, keep building is my message. Building is awesome. So.
Perfect. As usual, this is, I believe, episode number 5, if that's in my notes correctly. It is our last episode. If you guys were interested in kind of our end topic here, because, our topics went from, we start talking about events in Vietnam, protocols, and we kind of ended off here with AI and stuff like that. If you're interested in learning more about AI, and specifically our ventures in AI, right, so plugins, stuff like that, our most previous episode talks a lot about that, talks about a bunch of different projects that we built. A big part of that is discussion about AI. I believe episode 2 also talks about AI, one of our previous episodes. It's all on the playlist, so if you're watching this on YouTube, then you can see the playlist on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can see all the episodes in there. Go watch them. Each episode has a ton of interesting topics and alpha for developers, stuff like that. But other than that, these episodes are uploaded every single week on Friday, and you can catch us on episode number 6, FAFO Chill, next week.